Yeah, good morning or good evening, everyone. Welcome back. Yes, we'll continue to the previous permission section, the demonstration which we are discussing. But in this section, especially, we are going to look into that, the how to change the file permissions. Yeah, so let me, yes, I'm just going to clean up the files. I just like to create it because we have done some changes. I need the fresh files. Yeah. Okay, let me create one file again. The who command related output redirecting to that user start txt. And this file, the default permissions, yes, we have the user level. Okay, I have already logged in with root user, right? Okay, instead of using that root user, let me do one thing. I don't want to use the root user. Let me clean up that. Again, this user started txt. Let me exit. Yes, I'm going to use that vagrant user. Fine. I'm just creating user start txt. Yeah, who is the owner of this vagrant, and he's a read write permission. And the group of this file is the vagrant, and they have that like a read write permission, and others they have the read permission. Fine. Created file with the default permission, that is which we got it from the system whenever you create a file. Now let's do the some activity, some scenarios. How to remove write permissions of the user. This is the requirement. Now you need to remove write permissions to the user. Yeah, of that user to this file. Then how do you do that? What is the command? We know that already chmod, and user level we need to remove that user, removing the write permissions. And which file? users.txt. Good. Fine, that has been removed, that the write permission to the user. Now next thing is add read write execute permission to the owner or user or whatever it is. Now the requirement is you need to add that read write and execute permission to the owner. How do you do that? Yeah, again the chmod command. The owner level we need to add it, right? The owner, that is you need to add it or you need to remove it. As we are saying the requirement, you need to add the read write and execute permission to the owner. Adding is nothing but plus. Okay, but which permissions? Read, write, execute, these three permissions. And file name users.txt. Yes, now he got that the read, write and execute permissions. Yeah, in our vagrant shell, if we just observe that, if you see there's any executable files are representing in the different color, that is a green color. Yeah, with the green color, we can understand this file is having executable permissions for the current user. Or we can check it with that RWX. Yes, read, write, and execute permissions for the current user, that is a vagrant. Fine, that's where set. We are good with that. Now another requirement is you need to remove the executable permissions for the user. Remove the execute permissions for the user. How do you remove it? Executable permission for the user, that is one point. And as well as in the same command, adding write permission to the group. Adding write permission to the group and removing all permission to the others. So user level you need to have removing that executable permissions, and group level you need to add the write permissions, and all the permissions you need to remove to the others. Then how do you do that? Octal notation, symbolic notation, which one is recommended here? Yeah, use that symbolic notation, right? That's going to helpful. That's chmod. Okay, remove that execute permissions for the user. Okay, user removing executable permission. Fine. Then add the write permission to the group. adding write permission to the group. Group add write permission. Then we need to remove all the permissions for the others. Others are nothing but removing which permissions? All the permissions are WX. Yeah, so this is notation. And whenever you are running the command, as if you remember that in the previous section, -v, which you can use it to see that exact verbose information or output information. Yes, now you see that what it is saying, mode of users.txt changed from 0764. Before it was 0764 to it has been changed now to that 0660. Or if you just run that ls-l command on this file, and now you see that's like we have only read and write and executable permissions, we have removed it. Before it was there executable, we have removed it. And now yes, read and write as it is there for the group, but others we have removed that. No permissions for the others. Yeah, like this symbolic notation, easy way to use it that. Or if you know that numeric also, which you can apply that is also. But yes, the symbolic is one representation. Let's see that's like one more example. Removing read permission to the user and group. User and group, you need to remove that read permission and add that executable permission to the user and removing all permission to others. Yeah, now I can go for the chmod -v. And what is the first requirement? Remove read permission to user level and group level. User level, group level, remove that read permission. Okay, fine, good. And then adding execute permission to the user. User level, adding that executable permissions. Yes. Next, removing all permission to the others. RWX and a file name. Yeah, now before it was like a 660, now it has been changed to the 320. So we just verify that ls-l on this users.txt. Now the current user, he is handled only write and execute permission, not read. And group level, he is handled only write permission. He doesn't have the read and execute. Others, they don't have any permissions on this file. And whenever we have the executable permission, the color represents is different. As a green color, it is showing about it. Yeah, like this, we can, on the base of the requirement. So if you have that clarity on the requirement, then we can use it to the symbolic notation and working on these file permissions, adding or setting or removing, which we can work with that with a symbolic notation, or even that's numeric notation also. Symbolic notation, if you have this already existing one, some alter point of you can do. And octal notation, also it is going to helpful, but you need to calculate the number, right? Which one is exactly required. You should know other permissions also. But here, if you just observe that here as this notation, remove the read permission. Forget about other, whatever it is, that doesn't matter that. So here it is helping removing the read permission. Maybe the user can have that executable or write permission. We don't know that. But if you're using octal notation, you should know that other permissions what you need also, right? Because the total number you need to give that. That is slightly different. So whenever you are working with that octal notation and numeric notation, that is slightly different. But remaining, the objective is the same. But symbolic, which one is required adding or removing, if you have clarity, then you can do that symbolic. But if you know that entire user level, what are the permission, entire group level, what are the permission. Suppose for entire user, I need to have only read permission. Then I can use it simple chmod the for remaining all the users no permissions, and I can use it directly the file name. Now that is helping for me. Now okay, for that user only read remaining no other permission. Then it is very easy working with that this kind of numeric notation. Yeah, which one are you going to use it on the base of the requirement, symbolic or numeric? That is convenient point of view, you can plan it that. Yeah. And now let's do that, like one more small activity on this. Suppose you need to have that all the users permission settings. All the users, what is the notation which you can use it? Chmod, something like, I mean, all users which we can use it here, right? All the users executable permission plus X. And if I do that users.txt, yes, now all the users are going to have the executable permissions. Yeah, all the users, the particular user, that is the user level, group level, or others level, A, G, O, double A. So these are all the things which we can use it, and you can work with that symbolic notation to set the permissions or to remove the permission. Okay, so let's have this last one more point. User and group should have the read and write permissions, and others no permissions. User and group should have the read and write permissions, others no permissions. Numeric, if you convert it, how do you do that numeric way? Read and write. Read and write is nothing but 4 plus 2, 6. 6 is 6, right? 660. Chmod 660. User level 4 plus 2, read and write. Group level 4 plus 2, read and write. 0, no other permissions. Now you see that user, they have that read write. Group, they have the read write. Others, they don't have any permissions. The same thing in the symbolic notation, if you'd like to define it. Chmod user and group should have the read and write permission. Yes, this is also okay, valid. And others, they should not have any permissions. Yes, said that others has no permissions, that is 0 equals, and on the file name. Now user and group, they have the read and write, and others, they don't have any permission. This is also the same thing. Yeah, which one are you using? That is on the basis of the current requirement which you can plan it to use it. But objective of the both are almost the same thing. Yeah, the only user should have that the read permissions. How do you do that? Only user should have, just now which I had it right also. Only user should have the read permission. Whenever you are working with some private key files, and only user should have the read permission, and remaining group level or others level, they should not have any permissions. Then in that context, how do you define it? Yeah, chmod 400. That's going to helpful that setting that the only the current user read permission, remaining no other permissions. Yeah, this is about files level using chmod symbolic notation or the numeric notation. How do we use it to define the file permissions? Next, what do we, this directory structure, we'll move to that. So directory is like, okay, let me create some dummy directories over here. I'm just creating like two directories, -p directory 1, and within the directory 1, directory 2. And let me create some files for here, attach directory 1, within that a.txt, and within the directory 1 we have the directory 2 here, and I would like to create b.txt, and one more file also within the directory 1, and we have the directory 2, and here I would like to create one more file, c.txt. Directory 1, if you just check it, yeah, directory 1, which is having the a.txt file, and as well as directory 2, and directory 2 is having the two files. Total, this directory 1 is having one directory, but how many files we have? This is total 3 files we have, and you can just list it that ls-l caps r, and with the directory 1 also, which is going to helpful. to listed all the directories and file. Directory 1, which we have this one file and one directory. And file is having these permissions and directory is having these permissions. And who is the owner? Yes, anyway, Vagrant is the owner because we have logged in as Vagrant, and Vagrant user is belong to that Vagrant group. That's fine. And within the directory 2, directory 1 and directory 2 contains B and C files which are having these permissions as a default. Yeah, now suppose if I apply that, the changing the permissions at a directory 1 level, what are the permissions I am doing that I would like to apply to all the directories? How do you do that? Can we do that applying the changes or the permission setting that directory and the subdirectories are all the subdirectories? Yeah, we can use it. Chmod is having that option that is -r as a recursively. And what is the permission that you want to set it? Yeah, the 75075 is current user full permissions, and the group level that is read and execute permissions, and others they don't have any permissions. That is 750 notation. And on which directory that you want to do that? That is directory 1. If I run it, and if I go for ls-l or on this directory 1, now we see this like the directory 1, what are the files we have? A.txt is having user level full permissions, and even the directory also full permissions. Read and execute, others they don't have. Even b.txt, c.txt also having the same permissions. Yes, if you would like to set up that directory, and within the directory subdirectories are all the files which we have this with the same permissions, then use that chmod with -caps or notation. And what is the permission that do you need it for this current directory and all the directories within the subdirectories? Then you can define the permission and you can pass the directory name. Even that if you check it, ls-ld with the directory 1, yeah, these also having the same permission, right? rwx for the current user, rx read and execute, that is a file, and others they don't have any other permissions. Yeah, the directory level or subdirectory and all the files, if you need that setting up that same permission for all that, then chmod -caps or which we can use it, and we can set the permissions for all the subdirectories and files. Yeah, so and one more point, suppose here let me create one file now. Just a minute. Okay, the screen is visible, fine, good. Yeah, suppose now the point what you have is ls-l. If I go for that users.txt, yeah, users.txt is having that only read permission, fine, for the current user. Others they don't, I mean others point of view, group point of view, don't have any permissions. Now I'm just writing that if config creating the something i.txt interfaces.txt, and now interface.txt is having that the user level, group level, and others level, these are all the permission, but users.txt we don't have this any permission. Now the point what you have is, so whatever that i.txt file which we have this the permission, the same thing which I need to apply to that users.txt. That means one file permissions referencing to other file. Yeah, then how do you do that is chmod, what is that option which is having is the chmod with the symbolic notation we can use it, octa notation we can use it, and -caps are whenever you are working with the directory level permission to adjust it. Now one more the concept which we are understanding, reference equal to which file that do you want to refer that i.txt, and to which file that do you want to set up that users.txt. Now if you apply that ls-l command, now users.txt also is having the same permissions. Before it was like only read permissions on the users.txt. Now what are the permissions we have? That the i.txt or interfaces.txt, same permissions you need to set to that other file, that is user.txt. Then how do you do that is, okay, so this is having rw, okay, rw is for the 6, this is 6, this is for 664. I can set up that, yeah, 664 I can set up that, applying this on the users.txt. But instead of that, with the reference option which is available in the chmod command, -reference, and you can define that one file permission, whatever we have, the same settings you can apply to that, or same permissions you can apply to that other files. This one we can call it as a reference option. Yeah, so that is one more point, understand. And another point, what we have this, working with directories, the effective permissions on the directories. This is very, very important, because sometimes whenever you are running the file, it shows the permission denied. It shows that permission denied. But whenever you check it, the permission of the file, everything it seems good. But whenever you are trying to run it or reading that, it is showing that permission denied. Then what could be the problem? Or how do you go ahead analyzing that? Yes, that is directory level permissions are also very, very important. Let me just talk at some examples on it, or let me show that. Yeah, we have the directory one interface.txt, users.txt. Fine. Let me create one directory mkdir. I'm just using Linux and Ubuntu. Yeah, these are the two directories. I'm creating that, and I'm writing that, or I'm creating that one file within this directory, that is within the Linux folder. I'm just creating users.txt. And if you just check it, the Linux folder, yeah, within the Linux folder we have the Ubuntu folder, and I have this one file users.txt. And now let me define that this Linux folder only read permission. Now I'm Linux folder, what are the permissions we have? ls-ld Linux. If I check it, what are the permission we have? The user full permissions, group full permissions, and others, they can do that read and execute on this Linux folder. That's the default settings which you got it. But I don't want this permission. Now I would like to set to this directory, that is like as 400 on the Linux folder. Now whenever I'm running that ls-l, okay, before that, okay, let me just show that ls-, let me check it, this directory settings. Now this directory, Linux directory, is having only current user read, no other permissions. That is 400 we have defined, right? Directory level we have defined the 400, but that directory is having one subdirectory, that is Ubuntu, and we have one more file, but it is not showing. Node 0 directories, 0 files. After setting the 400 permission, it is not showing any directories, no files, because so we have defined only read permission. Now if you just run it ls-l on this Linux folder, so it is showing that permission denied, because you don't have that I mean, the read option we have the permission, right? Read option we have the permission, but why it is showing that permission denied here? ls cannot access Linux Ubuntu, the permission denied. ls cannot access Linux users.txt, permission denied. And it is showing the some blank representation Ubuntu users.txt. So why it is showing that is the permission denied is, if you just run it alias command, especially ls, if you just observe that ls is going to apply that on the color representation. Yeah, whenever we are running that ls command is nothing but background. It is not just ls. It is going to try to access that each file and the folder which are there in that directory, and it is going to try to access the file to define the coloring option. To define the color, the ls, whatever the ubuntu folder, whatever that like user started text, it is not having the permissions. It is just only read point if you can use it, but you cannot do that. Setting up the colors of the directories displaying, files displaying, you cannot do that. That's why it is showing that permission denied. And suppose if I go to that, the cd linux folder, is it going to accept it? cd lx, but lx directory is having only read permission, no other permissions. Then what is that? Is it allowing the permission or not allowing that? cd, what it is going to that? cd you are using is nothing but you are trying to modifying, right? You are trying to access that content to modify it, so it is not giving the permission denied. Can I delete the file within this linux folder? Suppose rm-rf in the linux folder users.txt which I'm having. Can I delete this? The file is, I mean, you don't have the permission to delete it. Delete is nothing but modifying. It is not accepting because the directory is not having the permission to delete the content of that directory, or you cannot change the properties of it because the write operation is not there. Yeah, so that is like why we have this linux folder is having the just read permission. You cannot go to that directory whenever we have the read permission, or you cannot remove the files which are there in that directory. Yeah, why the permissions are denied for the files is ls command which is using as like a coloring representation. That color to set up that it is trying to access the files, but it is not having the permission. That's why ls command is shown there. But can I list the files? Listing the files is nothing but reading, right? In the directory we have any files or the folders are nothing but if I am doing that ls command is nothing but that is you are just reading the files, file names or directory names or properties of that file or directory, you are reading that. But by default whenever I use it, it is not accepting that. So here you see that it is showing that file names fine, but permission denied. Why it is showing that permission denied? Yeah, so here if you just run it ignoring that color notation, if you run this, then you see that you are able to access it. Yeah, you can read that the files and folders which are there in that, as you have on this directory you have the read permission. But why it is not showing here? It is ls by default alias name which is defined the color, that color to set it for that directory or the file, it is not giving the permission. That is a point out there. Okay, that is read. You can read or you can list that files and the folders. You can read it, yes, not a problem. But you cannot access the directory or you cannot change that file names or you cannot remove the files if the file is having the only read permission. Suppose now let me do that setting up the 600 settings. 600 to this Linux folder. I'm changing that now to the 600. 600 is nothing but read and write. Now what are the things we can do? Yes, we can see the files of it. ls yeah, the -x, yes, we can see the files. Yeah, it is helping about is to see the file, and as well as we can I mean, suppose can I go to this directory? Yeah, still it is not accepting that. Oh, still, I mean, even that if you set up this the right permissions also, it is helping to see the file. Okay, files anyway, it is helping that the before also the same notation, and even here, now also here we cannot go ahead to that the cd command. You cannot access the cd. And can I remove the files from that? No, still that is also not possible, right? Txt. It is not accepting that even to delete that the file in that. Can I create a file in that directory? Something touch within the Linux folder, something abc.txt. Can I create this? No. Yeah, so even that 600 also is not supporting that. The read and write, the still, yes, you cannot go ahead to that directory. You cannot list up the files. The still it is showing that updating that content. But what is the permission that's required is 700. Suppose let me set up that 700 on this Linux folder. Now we have the read, write, execute permissions on this. Now if you go for ls-l Linux, yes, now it is helping to list all the files. Now I can go to that Linux directory. Yes, you can do that. You can execute it, all these. Can I remove the file in the Linux folder? Oh, already I'm in the Linux, right? Okay. Yes, I can remove that, the file as well as. And can I create a file? Touch abc.txt. Yes, I can create a file. Yeah, so this directory level, I mean, sometimes whenever you are accessing the file, but you have the full permissions on the file, but sometimes we see the permission denied. Then go and check it that directory level permissions also. What are the permissions you have on that directory? Even after that directory is having the permissions and still the file you are running, you are not able to run it, it is showing the permission denied. Then check it about the top level one more directory also. And then top level, yes. So the file you are running permission denied is nothing but top level directory permissions, then top level of that directory permissions, then top level directory of that permission. Yes, all are going to have that the impact to access the files or the folders in the current directories. Don't think that only on the current file permissions, or don't think that only on the current directory permissions. Top level directories also are also going to have that impact to access that the files in the current directory. Yeah, so that is the main conclusion on this directory. Suppose let's have it directories have the full permission. Now this I go back to that, and if I see this Linux folder, directories have the full permission. Fine, but file is having the less permission. Okay, so ls Linux, if I just print it, yeah, we have that abc.txt and ubuntu. And suppose let me just show that the permissions here within this Linux folder. Suppose abc.txt, which is having that rw permission. Now if I try to remove it, remove in this Linux folder abc.txt. Can I delete this file now, abc.txt? Because the directory is having the full permission, no issues on that. And the file is having abc.txt is having read and write permission to the current user. Can I go ahead deleting the file? Yes, we can delete it, no issues on it. But suppose, let me do one more point, one small case. Touch within the Linux, within the Ubuntu, abc.txt. Let me just create it. and chmod. Let me set up that the 0 permissions of that file. Now this abc.txt is not having any permission, very less permission, but directories have the full permission. Can I go ahead deleting this file? rm. Now it is asking the confirmation. Yes, if it is having the less permissions on the file compared with that the directory is having the full permission, but file is having the less permission. Then now it is prompting for the confirmation. The remove write protected regular empty file. Yes, if you say the confirmation yes, then the file which will be deleted. Now there is no file or such a directory. Yeah, directory permissions are also going to play important role whenever you are working with files. Yeah, that is important concept here. Yeah, in the lab guide it has been given all the steps. Try to understand each step and work with that. And how do we use it? Symbolic notation. How do you use it? Octal notation. So those points also just work with that. On the base of, yeah, objective is almost the same, but on the base of the requirement, yes, some cases symbolic notations are helping. Only the particular permission adding or removing, existing one you don't want to touch it, remaining all that, then you can use it symbolic. But entire user level or group level or others level, if you'd like to define it, then you can use it numeric notation. And directory level permissions are going to play very, very important role whenever you are accessing that the files and the folders within that the parent directory. So file is having that all the permissions, but you are not able to do is nothing but check it about directory level permissions also. That is one point. That is a conclusion here. Yeah, all these points, consider it and work it on it and practice it. Yeah, the very, very important, the securing about your files on the Linux system. If you are creating any file or you are creating any directory is nothing but what about your scope on that file, about your permissions, about your team permission, there's a group permissions, and what about others who are going to log into the system, whether they can access this file or not. So all these things are important, and as per that you need to set up the permission. But how to set up the permission is chmod command. But either you can use it rwx ug and what is that others point of view o, and next which we have this is all those symbolic notations 421, that is read write execute, and directory level, file level. Yeah, so that's about understanding. In the next section I'll come back giving some more commands on that. How do we change the owners or how do we change that groups? Yeah, now the file contains whenever we are running about it, the file contains the user and a group. Is it possible to change these owners and groups? Who can do that? Yeah, there are some points we have some small section. I will give this in the next video. This section, just keep this in the mind. That is chmod with octal notation, symbolic notation, and directory level permissions impact, and understanding that high level permission, low level permission, set a directory level and a file level. Yeah, that's all from this. Yeah, thank you.